We'll pass the mic down the row here, and if you could each introduce yourself and your role in your organization, and we'll get into deeper questions, but from a very high level, just note how your organization approaches the intersection of IoT and blockchain. You might want to pass that one. Thanks.
Steve. Hello?
Yeah.
Steve Shapiro, CTO and co-founder of Token. We build an identity ring that lets you live keyless, cardless, and free of passwords. So it replaces all of the identity artifacts that you typically carry around. Yeah, much better. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. So, at the end of the day, what we do is secure credentials, and we have a secure element where all these things are stored. We have a biometric sensor that identifies you when you put the ring on. And we let you authenticate yourself over Bluetooth or NFC, proving 2 factors of authentication because you're proving both possession and that biometric second factor. I think as things get more and more connected to the internet, there's kind of several facets to IoT, right? On one hand, devices talk to each other. On the other hand, you have to think of how they talk to a cloud or other systems. But at the same time, we as individuals also have to identify ourselves to these devices in order to prove to them that we're authorized to ask them to do certain things. And I think cryptography and decentralization and those aspects of blockchain are definitely going to permeate IoT because it's the only way to kind of very reliably prove your identity. So the way we see it, individuals, as time goes on, will have to more and more manage private keys. And we want to create that user experience layer for cryptography that allows people to interact with blockchains, with IoT, log into websites, whatever it is that you have to do that involves cryptography. We want to be the user layer that enables individuals to do so.
Okay, so my name is Kevin Chen, and I am the evangelist at the IOTA Foundation. So some of my roles include doing business development, adoption strategy, as well as ecosystem development. So IOTA on a high level, which I'm pretty sure we'll go more into the weeds later on. So IOTA is a distributed ledger technology, kind of similar to Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so forth. But it is not a blockchain. In fact, it is blockless. But aside from going into the weeds, I'll talk more about the what IOTA is doing on a high level. So IOTA, we're hoping to become the underlying protocol for IoT devices and M2M transactions for not just secure data audit trails, but also for microtransactions or the transfer of value as well. And how we do this is that we want to encourage co-creation and co-innovation to a lot of our partners. And we have 3 ways that we want to make that happen. So the first one is we are a nonprofit, and our code is is free and open source. So anybody is able to use our code for their own commercial products or build on top of it. The second one is we are a nonprofit, a foundation based in Berlin, Germany. And the reason why we are based in Berlin is because we want to get the backing from a lot of the international standards organization, as well as the European Union, which is on the contrary to a lot of the other cryptocurrencies where they want to be based in Switzerland as a way, since a lot of their regulations is a little bit more lax compared to countries in the EU. And our third way is that we have a very global team. We have 4 co-founders, and all of them, they're all from different countries. And we have a team of about 30 people from dozens of countries, from United States to Norway, France, Germany, Australia, Israel, and so forth.
Okay, great. My name is Andre De Castro. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Blockchain of Things. I started Blockchain of Things in actually working on developing the product in 2014, only incorporated in 2015 with a vision to allow any company very easy integration into the global Bitcoin blockchain. I quickly realized that I was watching transactions upwards of millions of dollars being sent from one point of the planet to the other without ever being compromised. At the same time, reading the paper every single day and realizing that devices and systems were being compromised constantly. So I kept asking myself a question: when is the industry going to wake up to this? So I set out on a piece of paper and a pen to list all of the reasons why companies wouldn't adopt this. Interestingly enough, one of the first things I came across was integration. Most people don't know this, but if you want to integrate with the Bitcoin blockchain, you get yourself a blue screen Unix daemon and RPC calls, and good luck. It's why the consulting companies love it, because they can send you hundreds of developers. So I needed to create a web services interface where you could write in any language possible. Then I realized that that wouldn't fly either, because how are companies going to manage cryptocurrency? You can't make a transaction or send a transaction without holding cryptocurrency. You can imagine John or Susan in the accounts receivable department having to buy cryptocurrency on the open market, bring it into a wallet, have the IT department secure that. When you integrate into an assembly line, you have to send those cryptocurrencies to a different endpoint, trust everybody with the private keys along the way. Companies would never adopt this. So I set out to abstract all of the Bitcoin from Bitcoin, because I realized it was its Achilles heel for people who really want to integrate into the global Bitcoin blockchain. Then I realized there were limitations, such as speed, scalability, and I set out to build around all of those. So today we're the premier product where companies are building blockchains from the bottom up, trying to secure. We've come from the top down, much like the internet, where they've built layers on top of layers to give us the great functionality we have today. Our product is called Catenis Enterprise, and allows you to quickly leverage anything you can do on the global Bitcoin blockchain. Our field of concentration, of course, is IoT devices represented by blockchain addresses. So we can do a closed loop permission network on a globally audited infrastructure, the strongest infrastructure in the world, that you pay zero for the infrastructure. You only pay menial amounts for the interactions. And that's what Blockchain of Things and Catenis is. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bruce Weed. I work for IBM, and my focus is working with companies and startups globally. I really focus in on the intersection point between AI, blockchain, and IoT. There's a lot of different use cases. I'll talk about some of them probably tonight when these things intersect. But it's important to call out from a blockchain standpoint, where we focus on is really working with the open source foundation and explicitly Hyperledger. So I won't talk anything about cryptocurrency or anything in that area tonight at all. That's not really a focus for us. And really it's to work with developers to understand what are their needs, provide better tooling so that they can get their applications up and running, whether it's on the IoT front, the blockchain, or AI, or doing a combination thereof. Thank you.
My name's Claire Curry. I work at Bloomberg New Energy Finance, which is a arm of Bloomberg that is a research group. So I'm the only person here who doesn't actually develop or own a company that works with blockchain, but I do write about these companies and others, specifically for use in the energy space. And my team at BNEF looks even more specifically at emerging tech and IoT within energy. So I'd love to share a bit about what we're seeing in that area with regards to blockchain. There are a lot of opportunities for blockchain in energy, and we can talk through a few examples. But the main reason we're seeing huge change in energy is because where we have today basically a fossil fuel-based system across the world, centralized generation of power, electricity. The world's going to see an increase of 58% demand in power in the next 25 years. And that is going to need $10 trillion worth of investment, 72% of which will be renewable. And where you have renewable energy generation, you have decentralized, distributed assets, often owned by people who wouldn't normally own very valuable security risk assets. And that's where I think blockchain can play a part. So for instance, solar, wind are more distributed than large fossil fuel generators like nuclear or coal. And you're seeing people building solar on their roofs. And that causes two problems and opportunities for blockchain. One is intermittency. That basically is the trend that the wind and solar farms don't run if the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. That causes huge grid management problems, which is a software issue. Grid operators don't have great software, and blockchain does provide an opportunity to integrate renewables better, which will bring us a greener future. The other thing is decentralized renewables, like rooftop solar, give an opportunity for the homeowner to begin to own assets that are really key for infrastructure. Today, the US has about 5% of energy generation as being behind the meter, so rooftop solar, for instance. That's going to rise to 17% in the next 25 years. In Australia, that will be 45%. So basically half of Australia's energy generation will be at the home level in 25 years. That is an amazing opportunity for blockchain because you as the homeowner can trade back with the utility, trade next door with your peers, your neighbors, sell power to anyone you want. There's a project in Brooklyn that hopefully we'll get to talk about that's doing that right now. And the third opportunity for blockchain in energy is around the fact that battery prices are falling through the floor. We saw a 72% decrease in lithium-ion prices since 2010. That means EVs are now a thing you see on the street. We see about 1% of car sales today are electric vehicles. That's really small. That will rise to 54% of new car sales being electric in 25 years. They're able to interact with the grid, and they're basically a perfect distributed asset which blockchain could help make a reality for things like vehicle to grid and for home charging. We forecast a battery market for the home of $20 billion in 2040, and blockchain could make that an amazing reality because for the first time, you not only can generate power at home, you can store it as well. And that gives you the chance to be part of the distributed ledger. So those are three kind of applications that we write about with regards to blockchain and the IoT and energy.
Great, thanks. So as everyone can see, we have lots of different perspectives here. We have kind of a consumer use case, we have industrial use cases, and kind of everything in between. Just to lend some more context to kind of, people scratching their heads and saying, beyond two big buzzwords at the moment, IoT and blockchain, why really discuss that, and what does the intersection mean? So, something that we're seeing from the meetup and anyone that's following IoT over time sees that, everyone's always talking about the edge and how, sensing is happening at the edge, where's computing happen, and, there's a lot in common there also with the idea of decentralization, right, and not having a single trusted authority. And so, along those lines, I think there's lots that can be leveraged. Andre, to your point, Bruce, to your point, not talking about Bitcoin, the currency, but the underlying blockchain. And so that's why this is named, blockchain and IoT, not Bitcoin and IoT. We can certainly, the currency part is certainly an important part of the ecosystem, but part of our thinking in putting this together was that there's this enabling layer of blockchain, and that it's a game changer across many different solutions and industries, and IoT is no exception. So I guess by that token, no pun intended to Steve from Token here, to set some context, we know that, blockchains, they provide a way to establish transferable property titles and rights without the need for trusted authority. And so it also has integrations with payments as well as contracts. So, along the lines of decentralization and cutting out that central authority or that middleman, folks on the panel, maybe tell us your perspective. Claire, you kind of kicked us off there talking about decentralization and what you're seeing in the energy industry. What use cases are you guys seeing around how blockchain and decentralization is transforming things related to IoT?
I can speak a little bit to that. So I'm not going to mention names, but there are companies we're working with. You may have remembered back, I think it was about 5 months ago when AWS went down, right? Well, the average person thinks only websites got affected. But in actuality, doctors couldn't get into emergency rooms with their key cards. There were devices and systems connected for protection from a security perspective in companies and homes. It may be okay because I couldn't turn on my lights because I use Alexa in my apartment. that might be okay, but it's probably not okay if your medical device in the hospital goes down or your doctor can't get into your operating room, right? So we're starting to realize that we're connecting more and more devices, and the architecture we're using is it's going to come to a pass. I mean, we're connecting billions of devices on two central points of failure, right? It's not one, right? When you're in the cloud, you got to protect your own system. You think it's one. Well, AWS going down has shown us that it's two central points of failure. That may be acceptable for my lights at home, although I don't think it is, but it's probably not acceptable across many different industries. So we're getting a lot of uptake in the healthcare area for obvious reasons, and we're seeing people contact us with more and more pain. Now, there's a lot of education that still has to happen. A lot of people believe that companies like my own can't leverage the global Bitcoin blockchain securely or do communication in vast amounts. So we're educating them one by one. But I think that the decentralized use case where things are going to be inevitable, where we can't keep doing what we're doing today, is very important.
I think that, it's good that you're teasing it apart down to the weeds and not just IoT, the buzzword. But I think decentralization is very, very important for a couple of reasons. Even there's a lot of people here, I'm sure. A lot of people here. Yeah, there we go. So there's a lot of people here that work in finance, I'm sure. And with 2008 and everything too big to fail, if you think about it, that's sort of happening to our digital systems too. You have, 10 years ago, a website gets hacked, a small number of accounts get compromised. Nowadays, Yahoo gets hacked and 3 billion accounts get compromised. So I think whenever you centralize things, you have single points of failure. And I think one of the things that blockchain has gotten everybody to start thinking about is how do you build decentralized system because of the resiliency, because of the redundancy. Keeps losing that. And I think that when it comes to like IoT, people worry about security. What happens if somebody breaks into a central server and tells a bunch of devices to do stuff? I think what's very, very cool about blockchain is you're able to interact with this autonomous network. It's not a particular server, and I'm able to prove my identity to it and tell it that I'm allowed to modify it all through cryptography. It's all challenge response cryptography. It's all ECDSA. And I think that, as you build IoT systems, as we reimagine various kinds of ledgers, it's this decentralized approach that will make it possible to secure these things going forward.
Yeah, so I'm actually from the finance industry, and this trustless aspect of blockchains one of the reasons why I jumped ship. So in addition to the decentralized aspects, I think one of the biggest values that blockchain or distributed ledger technology is able to provide for Internet of Things is that we have a huge huge ubiquity of a lot of different smart devices. However, in order for them to maximize their values or produce economically, we also need to have these smart networks as well, where these smart networks will not only be able to securely transfer data between these different IoT devices, but also payments as well, no matter how big or small. And I think that this is where blockchain can actually become like an actual killer app, since IoT, it has a very, very strong exponential growth trajectory compared to finance or banking, where a lot of their innovations getting more stagnant. So one of our use cases that we're actually also getting into is the identity of the digital twins. So digital twins is the data manifestation or the representation of a certain physical object. For example, one of our biggest use cases is smart cars, where we actually partnered up with Volkswagen and Energy. And Volkswagen, they're rolling out new fleets of cars, smart cars, where they produce a lot of different data. And how they can interact with our distributed ledger is that they're able to use our technology to hash their data, and then you can also use another decentralized database or timescale DB as a way to actually store these data. And then once users And then once these data is hashed into our database, it's immutable and it cannot be hacked unless if the hacker is able to overtake our entire distributed ledger. So one huge use case for it is that you're not only able to create like a digital twin for the smart car, but you're also able to create digital twins for different components of the smart car as well. For example, the odometer. And then one of the biggest issues is that the people often tamper odometers. For example, you have a car and then you want to maximize, like you want to sell the car as high of a price as you can. So then what they will do is that they will probably tamper the odometer. For example, they want to lower the mileage. And this actually happens pretty often. And usually sometimes the cars, they're not shown up at Carfax. But if the car, like the smart car, is able to be hashed onto our distributed ledger technology, and then you have a new seller who wants to buy that smart car, they're able to use our Tango to look up our data trail, and then have the confidence to make sure that the odometer is actually the way it is because it's because of the security, the cryptographic security aspects makes it tamper-proof.
Great, thanks. So, what was I going to say next? So one thing that the panel just mentioned also spurred something in my mind. We're saying, I think Andre, you were saying how AWS, that's kind of a consolidation of power. It's interesting because I think I don't know if you guys follow the mining communities a lot, but I think in the mining communities, there's also concern about consolidation of power, right? And that goes to the debate about how large the block sizes get and then who has the real kind of compute and computational power to then own a lot of the future mining capacity. And so it's even interesting to me that even as we get away from this and we're in decentralization, there's still a concern about consolidation of power because it still is a race to the supply and the demand side. So that's just an interesting thing to keep in mind. I'd like to turn to Bruce and ask, I think it's great. It sounds like you guys are very involved in the Hyperledger project. And more broadly, I know that within IBM, you've kind of focused on everything from IoT and big data and now blockchain, and you kind of really kind of put the pieces together. What are you seeing in terms of kind of the global ecosystem and how you're seeing blockchain can enable industry, whether that's in supply chains or specific use cases? What are you seeing the big impact?
Sure. So a couple of examples I'll point out, and this is one of the things I think is always helpful is to look at real-world examples. How is this technology being implemented? A lot of times we start off in the beginning of the cycle. What is this new technology? We figure out, okay, what is it about? We learn about it. We understand it, but then we don't know how to actually leverage the technology, and that's where use cases come in. So one example is we did a project for Walmart over in China. And basically what that project involved is using sensor data as they were shipping meats, pork mostly, from the farm to the table, tracking that through the blockchain and actually figuring out where was there potential for spoilage. So it was a big issue with that in China where stuff would arrive in the supermarkets and it would be spoiled already. Obviously with meat, that's a big concern. As you're shipping it, you've got to maintain certain temperatures. That's all sensor data, right? But the blockchain really ensures that integrity. If you think about traditional shipping, right, there's been a lot of paperwork, right? So somebody comes in, says off the loading dock, this is what's inside this particular container, and people sign off on it, and then the paperwork gets forwarded. Now through the blockchain, that can all be tracked automatically. You can go back, figure out if there's any kind of, interruptions, or if somebody tries to hack in, you'll know it, right? That's the whole thing about the blockchain is that you can go back and actually prove the provenance of where these things have come from. And then the privacy. The only people that are allowed on the blockchain are the people that have been given permission. So everybody shares the same distributed ledger. So we're seeing this, again, it's not the one technology. Any one of these technologies, just to be clear, is very powerful, but when you combine them together, that's where the real horsepower comes from. Another example we're seeing is a case where the companies, the telecoms, they own these different microwave towers, and they have to go and inspect them periodically. Traditionally, they've sent somebody up. They climb up to the top, particularly after storms. They may be looking at antennae or something like that to figure out if something damaged. They're now actually using drones, and drones will take pictures of things. They'll use that in combination with data that's coming off of the tower to do that kind of analysis to figure out, well, is it really worth sending somebody there to go take a closer look, or is the item really broken? Do they need to go fix it? So this is another way where, again, they're combining these different technologies, both the artificial intelligence along with the blockchain, along with the sensor data. So that's just two examples, but I think you'll see more and more of that. And the other thing that's fascinating is it's not limited to just one industry, right? Sometimes if you look at these technologies sort of independently, you know, blockchain is more prevalent and it's gotten more excitement in the finance industry, right? But this is when you start combining them, and all of a sudden it really gets broad across all the industries.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And you just jogged my memory because I actually meant to mention that I think it was maybe 2 years ago. I saw an article out about one of the first blockchain and IoT, or the first very public blockchain and IoT use cases, and it was in trade finance, and it was basically a container shipment of, I think, cotton from Texas to another continent. And they were using sensors and smart contracts to implement that. So that's also a cue that smart contracts are a whole other super interesting topic and deserving of its own separate meetup topic alone. So we'll definitely keep that in mind for a future one also. But I guess turning to the consumer side, my next question is for Claire and Steve. So Steve, on the consumer side, I know Token focuses on identity and security. So you kind of explained how blockchain enables that model for kind of authentication. Curious how consumers have responded. And then next, Claire, I'll ask you about similarly how consumers are responding when you're talking about distributed smart energy or clean energy.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are just tired of getting hacked, to be honest with you. I think so many people have had accounts compromised, they've been phished, a variety of circumstances where their identity was compromised, their credit card was stolen. So, and Bitcoin was really interesting, and I use that because it was the very first blockchain, which means it was the very first time that consumers had to manage private keys. And in the early days of Bitcoin, there was an article every week about somebody stealing 10 million here or 50 million there. And it's because, consumers have never had to hold this kind of responsibility on themselves. And this was the first time, and people didn't know how to do it. They would keep keys on laptops, on smartphones. It was just something that we weren't used to, that this idea that an immutable transaction can happen with our stolen keys and then we can never get anything back that we lost. Our first product was actually a hardware Bitcoin wallet called Case, biometrically secured, dedicated GSM connection. And it's because, A, we wanted to give people a very easy user experience in order to manage their Bitcoin. But two, we kind of realized that, this was happening in Bitcoin, and obviously we all know there's a lot of potential applications for blockchain. But we saw this happening actually across a lot of different verticals, where if you look at, for example, website authentication, there's a new spec that will be published toward the end of this year by W3C called Web Authentication API. And that allows you to use a device like this to, over Bluetooth or NFC, talk through the browser to a website to do challenge response authentication. So no more shared secrets, no more central storage of sensitive information. I think blockchain set off this line of thinking, but it's going to apply to so many aspects of our lives, the way we interact with devices. Even right now, I go to a friend's house, I say, Alexa, ordered 50 pounds of cat litter, and the guy's yelling no, 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 while I'm trying to say yes, because that authentication layer between us devices is very, very kind of finicky. Even on the web, passwords were kind of an afterthought. It was not something that was meant to live on a large distributed network. It was how you accessed your local PC or your local network back in the 70s and 80s. So I think consumers have felt this pain for a very long time. When you tell people go turn on 2FA, no one does it. I mean, at the end of the day, you will always choose the thing that's easier, not the thing that's more secure. So the question we kind of grappled with is, how do you let people perform cryptographic 2FA in a way that's literally easier than typing a password or pulling a credit card out? And it's resonated. I think people are excited because, especially people who understand how this stuff works, the idea of carrying my keys on a secure element protected by a second factor, they never leave the device, and using that for payment, for access control, for login to websites. I think it's a model that will grow as we move forward. And I think managing private keys is something every citizen is going to have to do, whether it's for their nationally issued driver's license, or their distributed crypto wallet, or for various enterprise or commercial use cases like we're talking here.
Great, thanks. Great. So yeah, and Claire, just to repeat the question, so you started to touch on kind of the value of decentralization and using a distributed ledger to help kind of consumers of clean energy take control of those assets and potentially transact. Maybe you could tell us more about what you're finding in terms of adoption from the perspective of adopting blockchain as part of that.
Yeah, definitely. So consumers don't really want this. I think it's being pushed on them somewhat through maybe hype, through maybe the people want to sell it to them for energy. It's just we're so used to buying electricity from our utility and using it to turn our lights on, and there's no real demand beyond small niche, more wealthy kind of, I guess, green hippies to really want a more integration with their utility and more ownership of energy. The other thing is with energy, unlike with Bitcoin, where you're basically trading virtual currency that you can't hold it in your hand, electrons actually need to transfer, or at least transfer energy to get your electricity to your house. So buying a kilowatt hour of solar power from your neighbor, you probably have to pay twice, 3 times what you'd pay from Con Ed, because of the basically electricity is beautiful at scale. You also then end up basically with a situation where you've paid such a premium for the fact it's renewable and the fact that it's from your neighbor. You may also pay a huge premium for the fact that you're doing it over the blockchain. Now, I know there are many companies out there, IOTA being one, who's trying to think about how do we transfer values that could be very small. With Bitcoin, you can transfer millions of dollars in one trade. The same with commodity trading and supply chain. With energy, if you're transferring a few kilowatt hours at a time, the blockchain is, at the moment, is not the best place to do that. So LO3 is a great example. They're a startup, have a microgrid in Brooklyn, in Park Slope, and they have a number of people who have rooftop solar who want to trade with their neighbors. But that is a case of someone paying a premium, and in the end, electricity is the same, whether it's coming from solar or coming from your coal plant. In the end, it just is powering your lights. You can't tell the difference. And therefore, it becomes not a very attractive premise for most people on Earth, where there's still 1.2 billion people who don't have power at all. So I think what we're going to see is small use cases like the LO3 project, which is a test case. The most exciting area probably is the bigger scale stuff, like what Tenet is doing in Europe, partnering with Sonnen and with IBM to look at much larger integration of distributed resources. But I'd say that for the small scale consumer side, we still need to get to a stage where we understand how we can trade lots and lots of very small value things, which is a kilowatt hour. I mean, I would point out Grid Plus is doing a really great experiment in Texas. They're trying to invent a startup utility by doing that. But they're using a ledger kind of off blockchain to aggregate thousands of trades to then pull all of them together to run it through the blockchain maybe once a month. So that's a way that consumers could get involved.
Great, and that's a great point that, what is the cost of that? Because until the cost comes down, that drives consumer adoption as well. So for certain cases where privacy or not working through a middleman are especially important, those are the folks usually adopting first, but there are many, many more to follow. So that's great, thanks. Excuse me. Along with all this hype around just how IoT has seen its share of hype, and now we're seeing a lot of hype for blockchain. I've been hearing about a lot of cases where, regardless, it's great that it's spreading to many industries. It's not kind of limited to finance or to specific use cases. What I'm finding is, on the flip side, companies and people are just saying, oh, we're going to put it on the blockchain, we're going to put it on the blockchain. And that can be also problematic because, the technical folks in the room will realize that public key cryptography can accomplish much of the same thing, right? So you can still use a public key for validation and authentication. And so I think for the cases of blockchain, you have to kind of consider what are the more, I guess, broader use cases and aspects of blockchain that you don't necessarily need that, public key. So, anyone on the panel have kind of a point of view on if you've seen any use cases that, they're more fit for using a public key, or you're seeing cases where maybe, Andre, this could be a good question for you, because I know that you've the concept of the digital twin that that Kevin had mentioned. In your company, in blockchain of things, it seems like you're enabling virtual devices via the blockchain addresses, right, for distributed messaging, that kind of thing. So what are your thoughts on kind of the mechanisms behind it and where blockchain is actually essential and useful as opposed to other mechanisms?
That's a great question. So it's something I grapple with constantly, right? And at several different levels. And you're correct. We do this digital twinning. We actually call them virtual devices. So you can think of our endpoints as a super intelligent managed wallet that represents a physical device. That's its digital twin, and it takes care of everything for you to make your life easy if you're a developer. In general, though, you have to ask your customer a question and ask them, can they do it better with a database, right? Can they do it better with a distributed ledger, right? So, no insult to any of my colleagues on stage who deal with distributed ledgers, but I've been distributing ledgers for 30 years in my career. I've done them across the world for portals, for banks, before I even got into blockchain, right? So the question then comes, are we today looking at situations that could better be used by existing technology because of this hype, the exact hype that is being brought up on stage? And we have to ask ourselves that question because in reality, people have absurd notions of what a blockchain is. Let's break it down. It's a read-only database system, right? Where does it derive its power? It doesn't derive its power by generating a blockchain for one company. No, it derives its power by a global community, a global footprint. These characteristics that many distributed ledgers or companies talking about private blockchains, and I'm sure there'll be places for them. Like there are places for intranets today. So many of you are my age, and you probably remember when the internet came out, what was all the rage? Intranets. I asked Citibank, can I use the internet to connect to your system? They said no. AOL fetched the largest amount of money ever in the history of the United States because no one was going to use the public internet. They were going to use intranets, and AOL was an intranet. So we've lived this through history already, right? So to sit back and say, and back then, guys, I remember, it was all over the papers. Email couldn't scale. SMTP was a disaster, okay? We could never have the amount of data pushed through the pipes. There is nothing different that's happening today than happened while I was growing up using the internet and excited about the technology. So yes, I come across that very often, and I tell my customers, no, I will refuse to do business with them. So unlike some of my colleagues that say, we're a foundation, we're open source, we're not. We're damn expensive, and we're closed source, but our product works. Now, you come to us, we will vet you out, and we'll tell you, no, I think you should use SQL Server. I think you should use Oracle, because this isn't the proper solution for what you're looking for. So I deal with that at the database level, at the distributed ledger level, right? And not to let anyone confuse you. I can get a deck of cards, and I can distribute 5 cards to each individual. That does not make a blockchain. A blockchain is me getting a deck of cards and handing each and every individual an exact copy of that deck of cards, right? Because there's a lot of confusion in this space. And I think the quicker we educate and we remove the confusion, the less the hype will be, and the more we will be able to take advantage of this great technology that's in front of us.
Great answer. Thank you. So that's a great segue to a question I had around data that I have. for Bruce. But first, I want to get back to to Kevin, and around IOTA. So, we've all seen that there's been excitement and some scandal around tokens. I know you guys are a foundation. I know you have the Tangle Ledger as your backbone, and from what I read, it's 0 fee for transactions. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the economics behind a no-fee transactional system, how IOTA makes that happen, and then is it commercially getting used for that no transaction fee?
Yeah, sure. So for those who follow the IOTA and our protocol, the Tango, our two biggest features is that we are feeless, and we also are scalability at scale. But before I get into like how that works or like what you said, the economics, I can explain about why in Bitcoin or blockchain in general, they have fees. Why is that the case? So the reason why Bitcoin blockchain, that includes Ethereum, has fees is because there are two types of users. Ones who are the transactors, the ones who are actually paying or making these payments through the Bitcoin blockchain. And then the other group are the miners, who are the validators, who want to make sure that the blocks, there's a global consensus. And then the method of doing the global consensus includes doing this really costly, energy intensive cryptographic puzzles to figure out which of the miners would have the next block to put onto the blockchain. And in order for the miners to be able to in order for them to compensate for their like electricity fees as well as their like time, they will definitely charge some certain amount of fee to the users for them to use their service. So one of the biggest obstacles in blockchain is that they actually have like a fixed amount of block interval, because for example in Bitcoin they have 10 minutes for every block, and the reason is that since Bitcoin has different nodes from around the world, they need to give them some time for them to propagate and so forth. But another issue is that the blocks, they also have a fixed size as well. For example, currently the current Bitcoin blockchain has 1 megabyte. So with the fixed amount of block interval, as well as the fixed block time, there's only a fixed amount of transactions per second that's able to go through for the transactions to go through the blockchain. So because of that, a lot of the transactors, they actually have to fight in order for their transactions to be quickly processed. And so that means that since the supply of the amount of slots to put in the transactions per block is limited, and when there's more transactions, there will be higher demands, and with the economics of that, they will have to pay higher fees. So that's why when there's more people using it, the people who pays the higher fees will get their transactions processed and put onto the block quicker, while the people who pay less fees, they're usually almost out of luck. So that means that if you have to pay like $1 million for a transaction, that will kind of make sense, because the percentage of the fee you have to pay for that is minimal. But if you have to pay like a coffee, or even like a kilowatt, or even like some kind of amount for a data packet, it doesn't make as much sense to make that payment through a blockchain, because very likely the amount of fees that you pay for that transaction is going to be higher than, for example, the amount you have to pay for the coffee. And so this is why in IOTA we completely get rid of the blocks. We completely get rid of the miners, and instead of having two groups, the users and the validators, the transactors or the validators, we actually put them to one. We couple them together. So when you make a transaction, your current transaction will have to validate two previous transactions, and then your current transaction will have to be confirmed or validated by 2 future transactions. So that means that if we want your transaction to be processed, to be confirmed by the Tango network, then you also have to approve two previous transactions as well. And because we have the validator and the transactors as one, there's no need for miners, and therefore there's no need for any fees, and that's why we are free and feeless. And another benefit for doing that is that going back to making when you make a transaction and validate 2, the more transaction that goes into our network, the actually more scalable becomes, because there's more transactions that are actually making 2 validations per each incoming transaction. So that actually makes our network much faster. So when more people are using it, the more scalable the Tango becomes, and that is in contrast to the blockchain.
Got it. Thank you. Great. So, Andre, I thought that was a great kind of metaphor that you threw out there about it's not just distributing a single card to the 5 players; it's distributing the entire deck. So, in that metaphor, the player is a node, right? So, in blockchain, and I'm tying this to IoT because, as we know, if you think about an industrial IoT use case, there's lots and lots of data. So it doesn't make sense to store all of that data on the blockchain, right? You might take a hash of that data, you store a hash of the data on the blockchain. So this question is for Bruce, because you come from the world of big data and you also see so much happening within IoT. I imagine you agree with my statement that it doesn't make sense to put all this IoT data on the blockchain, right? There's different ways to approach it. I kind of oversimplified it to just say you take a hash of that data, but maybe you can dig in and tell us a little bit more about how you're seeing how organizations are with large amounts of IoT data are approaching this.
So one of the things that we're seeing is the approach is starting to leverage stuff more at the edge of the network. So using artificial intelligence to analyze that sensor data that's coming in ahead of time, and then from there figuring out what goes on the blockchain and what you want to upload onto the cloud, right? Because traditionally it's like, oh, everything's got to go on the cloud. Well, obviously, as we've already talked about on this panel, that can be problematic for different reasons. So the concept is really kind of figuring out what's the important data, what are you gleaning out? So let's say you had a smart building, right? You're managing the heating system, air conditioning, lights, everything, and all that data is being processed is to figure out what are really the important attributes, because a lot of data that's being picked up is redundant data, right? It's like, oh yeah, the room temperature is 72. 2 minutes later, it's 72. 2 minutes after that, it's 72. Well, who cares, right? So it's really kind of ferreting out where are the abnormal changes and taking that data, getting it on the block or putting it in the cloud and processing it from there. So that's, I think, a key point, right? Because of the big data problem, we're getting more and more and more data, and as everything becomes censored, right? I mean, everybody's walking around like we're like giant Fitbits now, right? Everybody's got their smartwatch or their Fitbit or smartphone. It's becoming quite overwhelming, and a lot of that data, like I said, is redundant data or data that has no importance. So it's kind of figuring out what is the relevant data amongst all that, and then using that as kind of the crown jewel to move that data forward.
Super, thanks. So we have a few minutes left, and then I'd like to save some time on this panel for some audience Q&A, because you guys have all come out here, and I'm sure you have some really great questions. So why don't we start the microphone at the end with Claire, and then we'll work our way this way. And to kind of wrap up the more formal part of the panel, maybe you can tell me what you see as the biggest kind of barrier or pain point in what you're looking at with IoT and blockchain, and any thoughts about what the future might hold. Very broad question, but any parting words from each person?
I think I would just say that if blockchain's main benefit to me seems to be removing a third party, which involves giving power to the owner of the data or the IoT owner, whatever it might be, but also reducing those costs associated with that third party. That's a challenge. That's going to be really hard, especially for energy industry I write about, to get rid of those third parties. Sometimes they're essential. Like you need the grid to actually run the electricity grid. The same with a lot of other things. And I think the challenge with blockchain is, who is it really going to benefit? If it just becomes a way of allowing oil companies to trade oil cheaper, or keep track of kind of the oil tankers, or it allows power companies to actually get even more, I mean, utilities to get even more control over someone's rooftop solar, and kind of get more profits for themselves. For me, that seems like business as usual. And then I think it will end up just being integrated into making more money for the larger companies, which could be, that's fine if that happens, but it's not a revolution. And I'd like to see it being used for the consumer, but I'm not sure how that happens for energy.
So just a couple comments I would make going back to some of the earlier statements made. I think that if we look at sort of impediments, the first thing is to figure out, again, when to use something, when not. And I think, Andre brought up a couple of good points. There's a lot of good technology out there that would be perfectly suitable. So as an example, if some local bodega comes up and says, oh, I want to use the blockchain, I want to implement, AI and so forth and so on, I'd probably say, time out, right? Just use a database, store your information, use some great analytics, figure out how your store is doing, how you can increase sales, and you get the job done, right? Because why overcomplicate things? It just doesn't make sense. I do think these technologies, like all technologies, it takes a while to kind of roll out. And, we may see over time, I mean, big data was a good example of that, right? There was a lot of hype around it. Then people realized, well, in some cases, it wasn't quite what we thought. And in other cases, no, we did see the benefits that we wanted to. But that takes time to kind of work through, right? It's not overnight everybody gets an epiphany and has their exact answer. And I also think the innovation is going to come from a lot of these startups that are out there, right, that figure out how to leverage this technology in the correct ways, and again, doing it in combination with other technologies. But I do think that, there's going to be bumps in the road, right? It's not going to be, just simply, we're going to go implement blockchain today. It takes a lot of skilled resource to do that, right? It's not that easy to get that up and running. So I think that will be an initial impediment, right? Manpower or cost to go do that. But like everything else, it's going to come down. And the example or the case that I would give on this one, just, within my own company, it used to be, we had this great AI technology called Watson. And if you wanted it, you'd have to pay millions and millions of dollars. WellPoint, Sloan Kettering, they're good examples. However, now, literally a grandmother in her basement can go access Watson, right, through the cloud and start programming. Think about that. Billions of dollars invested in that technology, you can access it now right from the cloud. So I think that's going to where we're going to see the innovation, the growth is, again, in the startup arena, whether it's around blockchain, IoT, or AI.
And I hope you're absolutely right. And I agree with most of the things you say. And that's why we're here. We're here to enable anyone, the little guy, the large company that doesn't have the wherewithal. Believe you me, I'm an academically trained computer scientist. I've been in Bitcoin. I have a friendly face here. He told me in 2012 and 2013 you used to buy Bitcoin either from me or other. So I've been in this quite some time, and I have to tell you, it's not for the uninitiated. It's really, really difficult church stuff, and I live and breathe it. I've destroyed relationships because I'm more involved in cryptocurrency and blockchain than anything else. So that's how deep I am in it, and that's why our company is here. So if anyone of you in the audience want to build a decentralized application or something that's new, come reach us, because we make it really, really simple for you. The big challenge, just to answer the question that was asked, is education. It really, really is, right? Don't listen to what people tell you about smart contracts. They're just multi-signature transactions that allow you to receive and release whatever currency there is on that blockchain. It doesn't do everything. It does very little, right? Don't listen to articles that you read that will tell you that the blockchain is going to cure cancer. It's not going to cure cancer. And for the most part, ask yourself a question. Do I need decentralization? Do I need auditing control? Because most of the IoT systems we have, we don't need auditing control, right? If I'm gathering information, I may be gathering information from all my Alexa devices to make it better. I trust myself. I'm gathering that information for me, right? So really look at what you're doing. That's the reality out there. But I think once we have the world educated, we're going to start to realize that there's a lot of power in this underlying technology that we can take advantage of. The last barrier, I think, to the adoption of this technology, sadly so, is the cryptocurrency aspect. Most people are so blinded by the fact that the cryptocurrencies are so high up and people are trading and people are making millions of dollars that they lose sight, right? They think, oh, if a bunch of people gambled online and the currency went up, it must mean that the underlying technology is worth something. And quite frankly, I have to be on stage and tell you that I've tried everything. I'm the CEO of a second layer technology. Believe you me, if I could integrate with Ethereum and feel comfortable selling that to my customer, I would. If I could integrate into, I apologize, IOTA, or any of those things and felt that they were production ready, of course I would, because I can, and offer that to my customers. It will take years for that to happen, right? Till today, there's one production blockchain. Don't let anyone fool you. It's called Bitcoin.
So I agree to echo with a lot of the people on this on the stage that there's a lot of like education or informational asymmetry because again, reality, blockchain, distributed ledger technology is a very hard nut to crack. It's very, very hard to understand. And I've also been like looking into this space for some times, and it's definitely just like trying as a way to like wander around the jungle, and especially right now, I think a lot of the reasons why, to echo Andre's statement, why a lot of people are really into this space is because of the speculation. There's a lot of like really sky high cryptocurrencies out there, and a lot of people are just getting in because they want to make those multiple like 1,000, 2,000% returns. And it's also the same thing with a lot of people who also want to ICO as well. Sometimes why is the reason that they want to ICO? It's because they want to find ways to get around the original like the C stage like VC funding area, since they have to go through a lot of due diligence while doing ICOs. For them, they do a lot of like quick money. I think it also echoes that. I think it's also parallel to why people are also finding it pretty tricky to adopt to IoT. Is whether like for like many of the companies, whether IoT is actually the right solution. And if you want to add having IoT and then also having a blockchain as well, then it will just make this situation even tougher because you have to deal with two emergent technologies. But what I think is that even though that Bitcoin has been around the longest, has gone through a lot of trials and errors, been around since 2008, 2009, there are still a lot of other really like really great, promising blockchain or distributed ledger technologies out there as well that are up and coming, and they also might have the potential to also outtake Bitcoin. For example, like back in the 1990s, we have Ask Jeeves around as the web server. I mean, as the search engine, but then it got overtaken by Google. So anything could really happen. So some of my recommendations is that definitely look at the maturity of the technology, but also look at the growth, the technological movement. Where are they doing the work, the proof of concepts? Because sometimes, a lot of the blockchains, they're actually not like one size fits all. They're not able to resolve all the different problems. And in IOTA, we make that very, very, very clear that a lot of the different use cases, especially like consumer, we are probably not the best distributed ledger technology to use. But we believe that we do have a lot of different like niche or like beachfronts that people would really consider using our technology, to the point they're willing to develop a proof of concepts to the point that they'll make it a production ready a couple years to come. And that's another reason why we made our technology like free and open source, because anybody can go and try using it as a sandbox to create proof of concepts on our technology. And then if they fail, then they fail. But if they succeed and then we are able to deliver value on them, then that's more benefit. Then that's a definitely win-win situation. And we definitely want more of that to come.
I used Alta Vista back in the day. I don't know if Ask Jeeves was any good. I'm guessing you did too. Yeah, I would love to. I should have been doing this all evening. So I don't know. I guess I'm not worried. I don't think there are impediments or obstacles or anything that scares me. And the reason is, so like here's an example. I came here today on an Uber, right? I used an app that found me a driver in real time that was nearby, routed them to me. I was able to see them in real time. When I got into the car, it optimized my map based, my route based on real-time traffic conditions from data coming from other phones. Like, you think about all the technology to make that happen. It's pretty amazing. The first breakout success iPhone app when the Apple Store launched was a fart app. So like in terms of IoT and blockchain, we're at the fart app stage right now. It's just very, very early. And I think, yeah, right. And I think in the early days, you do things just because it sounds cool or it sounds nifty, or you're trying to play with things and things like that. And I think a lot of times it's hard to know exactly what this thing's going to get used for. When the iPhone app launched on that day, when the iPhone launched on that day, you couldn't predict Uber, even though now it seems obvious. And it's because you need the fart app and then the flashlight app and then the next thing and the next thing. The early things that generate ideas for the next stage, and honestly, I think it's just a matter of a natural course of events. So this stuff doesn't scare me. I think these are, the biggest hurdle is coming up with use cases that are valuable to people at the end of the day, and use cases that you can't complete now with a cheap database where you're just saying, oh, it's this plus blockchain. I think our imagination just hasn't been open enough yet to really figure out how to leverage this technology because it's so alien compared to everything else that we've messed with previously. But it will get there. As long as people, continue to build stuff and continue to push the envelope, we'll definitely get there.
Great, thanks. So, if I can kind of even state a theme of what I'm hearing tonight, it's, choose the right tool for the job. So there are different types of blockchains, right? For the technically inclined, read the white papers, really get into it, because that's where you see where the rubber hits the road, right? So it's doing your homework there. It's also kind of, as all the panelists were kind of saying, what's the potential, right? It's like, what are the barriers? How do you overcome them? Use the right tool for the job, but also, think big, because there are all of these really interesting and new kind of possibilities that get opened up because of the characteristics of a blockchain and because of the architecture of IoT. So really interesting stuff. Why don't we give our panelists a round of applause? And we have about 5 minutes for some audience questions. So Ed, why don't you start us off?
So for IOTA, it's a data marketplace for sensors or bandwidth and APIs.
What's Mike going? Anyone else?
I said global track and trace, right? Database is centralized, owned by one company, is not going to be able to accomplish that. You need something at a global footprint, and you're not going to trust second parties or tertiary parties. So I think that's a perfect example.
So the only comment I would make from that perspective, I guess, is to do a little bit of research to figure out who are you targeting, right? You may be targeting, I'm just making this up, right? You may be targeting a large enterprise client that you want to go work with in regards to this arena. You should kind of understand what is their position around these technologies. because some enterprise companies have already sort of either made a decision or going in one particular way. You should kind of need to know that up front. Now, for other companies, it's probably less important, right? It's figuring out where is the right technology fit based on that company. I mean, it isn't, when I do a lot of whiteboarding sessions with clients, I don't go in there just going, oh, this is what you definitively need. I understand what are the client's requirements. As an example, just to take something offline on database, we have databases that we sell, but I also can recommend things like MongoDB. It's a third-party database, works on our cloud. If that's the right answer for the client, that's the right answer. So I think that's the way I would approach it.
Yes, I saw a hand up there. Yes. Oh.
So I've been a fan of uncertainty for a long, long time, decades, before a lot of this was being talked about. And I think the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that is produced by speculators in the cryptocurrency markets has seemed to run right up against the things that I've been really interested. So please tell me why I'm mistaken about that, or how things that people want to do with decentralized applications can separate themselves from the craziness going on in cryptocurrency markets.
I'd say it depends on what it is that you are trying to do. So I think, with, yeah. So
Governance, liquid democracy.
So I think, and this kind of touches on what you asked earlier, or I'm sorry, what you asked earlier. Different blockchains are designed for different reasons. I think the Bitcoin one, at its core, was designed in order to avoid or sidestep censorship. So at the end of the day, it's designed to allow you to do anonymous transactions. And I think if that's what you want to do, then that's the blockchain you use. If your goal is, to hold online elections in a way where people can validate that everything was done correctly, I think a blockchain would need to be designed specifically for that. So I guess when you look at the speculation that's happening with Bitcoin, to a large extent, that's okay. That's like speculating on gold or diamonds or something else where you just have a commodity-like product. And I think with other blockchains where the purpose isn't that, you won't see that kind of volatility just because they're designed for a completely different reason.
Yeah, I think why the speculation is so volatile in the cryptocurrency space is because it is extremely new. This is in complete contrast to what we see in security, where like equity security, where it has been around for at least, I believe, almost 2 centuries, while like cryptocurrency trading has started since 2008 and 2009. And because of that, there's not a very good way to do like a lot of fundamental analysis to actually try to appraise the intrinsic value of these cryptocurrencies. So that's why people are just like just throwing darts somewhere as a way to try to determine what's the price, and then they will trade it. And then because of the volatility, there's a lot of animal instincts that goes on, like the herding mentality. When more people gets like panic or like become really greedy, then more people will do the same thing, and then it just becomes like almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But at least from our perspective, from my perspective, I want to focus more on the intrinsic value of the blockchain or distributed ledger technology. That includes a lot of adoption, perfection of our technology, and I think that really, and then with the more mature technology, for whichever blockchains or distributed ledger technology, and the more of the growth of the adoption, I think that will be really, really beneficial. But in the meantime, I'll just say let speculators speculate. And then I think the last thing that we want to do is like having some kind of like capital controls, like for example, what China did with a bunch of their exchanges, or like a lot of the bans on ICOs, which could have some like reasons, but one of my biggest warnings that they shouldn't do it like some kind of blanket regulation act. But so I think that in the long term, people will start to wise up. There will be more of a like a financial literature regarding cryptocurrency. And one of my own personal like dreams is that I've taken the CFA, and I dropped out of CFA level 3 so I can pursue more in cryptocurrency. I do really hope one day that in the CFA curriculum that there will be a part where it talks about cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency valuation, and I think that would be really great.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think it goes also back to if you're looking at crypto as a substitute or replacement for fiat currency, there's the enabling layer, again, the blockchain, and then there's the currency side. So there might be speculation on the currency side, but a lot of the use cases we discussed tonight had nothing to do with the currency. It was the underlying mechanism. So I think there's also hope there. Other questions? Yes.
As emerging technology, blockchain, where do you see, right now it solves a lot of security and privacy concerns today. How is the industry preparing against quantum computing and the increase of processing power in 10 years out?
I'd say you guys can. I'd say that's not really our problem. The whole internet dies when.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We obviously at IBM are working in that field quite heavily. We're still a ways off on that. That is going to change things drastically across the board. So at this point, I would kind of put that on a back burner because that's going to be a real game changer, right? And it's really hard to speculate at this point exactly where that's gonna go.
However, addressing that is not difficult. What I'm saying is we already have mathematical proofs for quantum resistant algorithms. So we will retrofit it when the time comes. Humans, we're resilient.
I'll just say that IOTA is quantum resistance. We use the winterness signature, which is one base of half functions. And if you're interested in learning more, you can talk to me afterwards.
Thanks. Other questions?
Thanks. If we could hone in on one of the use cases, particularly the industrial IoT use case, what is it about that use case that would cause someone to choose to use the blockchain versus just straight encryption?
I think it's the number of parties involved. So like, let's say I order something on Amazon and FedEx delivers the package to me. I go onto the FedEx website and it says, oh, it left the facility. Now it hit this sorting facility. Now it hit this. Now it hit that. Now it's out on a truck and now it's at your door. And because FedEx touched it the entire time, it's super easy for them to do that. You don't need a blockchain. But when you're talking about a supply chain where multiple parties are involved, multiple hops are being made for the various things, you need to know the condition of it, the time where it got there. At that point, it's either one company owns that or they figure out a way to co-own it. And a blockchain allows them to co-own it and to be able to both see the data and modify the data in a way that's shared between multiple entities. So I honestly think in those kinds of circumstances, the number of parties involved is what kind of starts to move it into blockchain territory.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think the other key factors, right, is the immutability, to being able to know for sure that this stuff isn't going to be, edited. Once something's on the block, it's there to stay. And if something were to happen, you'd be able to go back and check the provenance and see who edited it. Having the consensus up front, you've got, 6 parties, 8 parties, whoever the parties are involved, all in agreement. Yep, this is what happened. This is where the asset's been transferred to. So it's all those variables together. And that's why, one size doesn't fit all. This goes back to the way, people approached IT back in the 1940s, 1950s, 60s. Requirements gathering, folks, right? It all starts there. What is the requirement of the client? What does the customer want to do, right? I don't give somebody a spoon if they want to build a pool in their backyard. I give them a backhoe so they can dig the hole. So we need to figure out, what is the client looking for and then figure out the right technology.
All right,
not make it to a phase 3. I mean, is that worth getting it on the blockchain, what with minor fees and all that?
I think clinical trial data is perfect. If you look at statistically how much tampering there is with clinical trial data, especially because there's a lot of money involved, right? Because if you get the right outcomes, you can get your drug on the market and convince the FDA and make a hoard of amount of money. So if you dig in through the data, and I have, it's fraught with fraud. Right? And that's the reality. The reason why a lot of attorneys make money and there are lawsuits is because it's the rush to get the clinical data out, and blockchain is the perfect solution for tamper evidence. It's the quintessential perfect solution for it.
Yeah, I also like to add pharmaceutical supply chain is also very critical. And in general, the more sensitive, more critical the data is, or the more vulnerable it is to tampering, the more necessary to have a distributed ledger technology.
So I'll invite Ajay back up here, and to Claire, Bruce, Andre, Kevin, and Steve. Thank you guys. Let's thank our panelists once again. And thank you for coming out. Any final words from you, Ajay?
I was going to say, if we still have maybe a minute, if anyone wants to add another announcement or request, last chance, anyone? Okay. Yeah.
From your panelists, I run a small cryptocurrency meetup called Crypto Circle, and it's on Monday the 13th. It's at the 4040 Club. We do giveaways. There's free food. If you have questions about ICOs, there is always a law firm there to answer any of your questions. It's really high end. The pizza was wonderful, but we don't serve pizza. It's actually free food from the location, which is fantastic. You can go to meetup.com, crypto circles. Sorry about the shameless plug, but had to do it.
That's perfect. Oh, yeah.
So I also run a meetup group. It's called IOTA Beyond Blockchain NYC, and our next meetup is about is on the 14th in Tuesday.
Bruce, I think you I think you have a meetup too, Bruce. So I think it goes to you now.
Anyway, just a couple of things. I also run a meetup in New York City. But wait. I'm going to add to that, but seriously, I really do. It's a Watson IoT meetup, not to conflict with this one, obviously, but if you're interested in attending, please go out to Meetup and look us up. But more importantly, I run on LinkedIn 3 different LinkedIn groups. I run one on blockchain for business, one on Watson and IoT, and one on big data and analytics. So go out there. I talk about the technologies in general. My purpose of these things is to educate people and then also, importantly, showcase use cases. Because I think the 2 pieces are important, right? You don't want to just get educated on the technology. That's nice, but then, all right, again, what do I do with it? But you don't want to just hear about use cases if you don't understand the technology. So I try and really focus on those 2 things. Please go out there, take a look, and we'd love to have you on board there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you next month.
Thank you for coming.